The world watches, holds its breath. A chill wind blows through the corridors of power. In the heart of Beijing and the halls of Washington, whispers turn to shouts. The unthinkable is now a possibility. Nuclear war, a specter that has haunted humanity for decades. It threatens to become a reality. China, the rising dragon. An ancient civilization awakened. Economic might growing. Military power expanding. A nation asserting itself on the world stage. No longer content with a secondary role. The United States, the aging superpower. A legacy of dominance, challenged. Economic uncertainty, a constant worry. Military commitments, stretched thin. The pressure to maintain its position, immense. Both nations, armed with nuclear arsenals, a deterrent, or so the theory goes. But in the hands of fallible humans, even the most sophisticated weapons become tools of potential annihilation. The stakes have never been higher. Dawn breaks over the South China Sea, a sky painted with hues of false promise. The U.S. destroyer USS Fitzgerald cuts through the waves, a steel predator in a sea of uncertainty. On the bridge, tension crackles in the air, thick as the humidity. From the mist, a shape emerges. The Chinese destroyer Lanzhou on a parallel course, too close for comfort. Nerves tighten. Voices rise in the confined space of the American ship. An order given, a course correction attempted, but it's too late. Metal screams against metal, the deafening roar of collision. The deck lurches violently, tossing sailors like dice in a cup. Chaos reigns. Damage control teams scramble. Adrenaline surges through veins, masking the fear. News of the incident races through the chain of command. Washington, Beijing. Accusations fly across the Pacific faster than any missile. Each side blames the other. Denials ring hollow. The incident, an accident, or something more sinister. Chinese state-run media explodes. Images of the damaged Lanzhou, a potent symbol. The narrative, a reckless act of American aggression. Nationalism, a potent drug, takes hold. Protests erupt in the streets of Beijing, Shanghai, and beyond. In the White House Situation Room, faces are grim. The president, briefed by his advisors, weighs his options. The mood is somber. A measured response is needed, but the pressure to project strength is immense. The world is watching. The Pentagon springs into action. Orders are issued. The aircraft carrier USS Ronald Reagan and its battle group, a show of force, steam towards the South China Sea. Submarines, silent hunters in the deep, take up strategic positions. The stakes rise. Diplomatic efforts falter. Phone calls between heads of state, once routine, now strained. Suspicion poisons the airwaves. Mistrust festers. The world holds its breath. The fragile peace, already cracking, threatens to shatter completely. Section 3. Shadows lengthen. As the sun sets on the South China Sea, casting long shadows over the water, the situation remains perilous. The USS Fitzgerald, crippled but afloat, is towed away, a symbol of the day's disastrous events. Both sides dig in, their rhetoric hardening. Military exercises, once routine, take on a new urgency. War games are played out on computers, the scenarios chilling in their realism. The unthinkable, once dismissed, now whispers in the corridors of power. Fear, a potent weapon, takes hold. In the homes of everyday citizens, a sense of unease settles in. The news, a constant barrage of alarming headlines. The world, it seems, is on the brink. Day one ends not with a bang, but with a whimper, a collective sigh of dread. A long, dark night descends. Sleep, when it comes, is fitful, haunted by the specter of what tomorrow may bring. Section 1. Eye in the sky. The sun rises on a world already teetering on the edge. The South China Sea, a mirror reflecting the growing tensions. A lone American drone, a RQ-4 Global Hawk, soars high above the disputed islands, its silent wings a symbol of American technological dominance. Below, on a Chinese destroyer, the crew tracks the drone's every move. Orders are barked. Fingers hover over buttons. The drone deemed an intrusion, a violation of Chinese sovereignty, a threat, a test. A sudden flash, a plume of smoke trails the drone as it tumbles from the sky, a broken bird falling into the sea. In the command center, a cheer erupts, a victory, however small. A message sent. The news reaches Washington like a shockwave. Outrage and anger fill the Oval Office. The downed drone, more than just a piece of hardware, a symbol of American power, challenged. A line crossed. Retaliation, swift and decisive, is demanded. Section 2. Economic warfare. The President convenes his war cabinet. Options are presented. Military action, the most extreme, is on the table, but the risks are enormous. Instead, a different kind of weapon is chosen: economic warfare. With the stroke of a pen, sanctions are imposed. Crippling measures targeting China's financial institutions, its tech giants, its energy sector. The American dollar, a weapon as potent as any missile, is unleashed. Global markets reel. The interconnectedness of the world economy, a double-edged sword. The Chinese yuan plummets. The stock market crashes. The economic pain, immediate and severe. In Beijing, fury mixes with fear. The American sanctions, a declaration of economic war. The Chinese leadership, caught off guard by the ferocity of the response, scrambles to stabilize the situation, but the damage is done. The dragon is wounded, and it will not be easily appeased. Section 3. Digital retaliation. As night falls on Beijing, a different kind of weapon is prepared. Not missiles, but malware. Lines of code written in the shadows, poised to strike at the heart of America's infrastructure. The order is given. With just a few keystrokes, the digital attack is unleashed. A virus, spreading through the networks that control America's power grid, its communication systems, its financial institutions. Across America, the lights start to flicker. Phones go dead. ATMs shut down. The internet, the lifeblood of modern society, slows to a crawl. In the darkness, fear spreads. From the White House to the homes of everyday Americans, the message is received. This is no longer just a war of words, of economics. The digital realm, once a source of connection and commerce, is now a battleground. The world watches, holding its breath, as the two superpowers exchange blows, each strike pushing them closer to the brink. Section 1. Ultimatums, daybreak. The world wakes to a new reality, the digital blackout, a stark reminder of the escalating conflict. Newspapers, printed before the cyber attack, seem like relics from a bygone era. Fear and uncertainty grip the globe. In Washington, the mood is tense. The president, his face etched with fatigue, convenes an emergency meeting of his cabinet. The Chinese cyber attack, a blatant act of aggression, cannot go unanswered. But with each passing hour, the options narrow. Across the Pacific, in the heart of Beijing, the Chinese leadership gathers. The mood is equally grim. The American sanctions, a blow to their pride and their economy, demand a response. But they too are wary of pushing the conflict too far. Through back channels, a tense exchange takes place. Ultimatums are issued, demands made. The U.S. demands China withdraw its forces from the South China Sea. China demands the lifting of the crippling American sanctions. Neither side is willing to back down. Section 2. The first shots. Hours tick by. The world watches, holding its breath, as the deadline for a resolution passes. The tension, already at a fever pitch, ratchets up another notch. On the high seas, nerves fray. A single mistake, a miscalculation could set off a chain reaction with unimaginable consequences. And then it happens. A report, garbled at first, then confirmed. A skirmish has broken out between American and Chinese forces near the disputed islands. Shots fired, casualties reported on both sides. The news, when it breaks, sends shockwaves around the globe. The unthinkable has happened. The conflict, once a war of words, of economics, of cyberspace, has now spilled over into the real world. Blood has been shed. The dogs of war, unleashed, are baying for more. Public outrage, fueled by fear and propaganda, explodes on both sides. In America, calls for retaliation grow louder by the hour. In China, the government vows to defend its sovereignty at all costs. The world watches horrified as the two superpowers hurtle towards the abyss. Section 3. Nuclear Shadow. As the sun begins to set on a world on the brink, a chilling message is relayed from Beijing. China, in a show of force designed to send a message to Washington and the world, has conducted a test of a medium-range ballistic missile. The missile, armed with a conventional warhead, lands harmlessly in the Pacific Ocean. But the message is clear. The world understands the language of ballistic missiles. This is no longer just a regional conflict, a spat between two superpowers. This is a threat to the entire world order, a threat to the very survival of humanity. In the White House Situation Room, the president receives the news with a grim nod. The unthinkable, once a distant threat, is now a terrifying reality. The nuclear genie is out of the bottle. The world watches, holding its breath, waiting for America's response. The president, his face etched with the weight of the world, issues a series of terse orders. American nuclear forces are placed on high alert. Submarines, lurking silently in the depths of the ocean, are given their coordinates. The world holds its breath, praying for a miracle. But deep down, a chilling certainty takes hold. This is not the end, but the beginning of the end. Section 1. The Hour of Ashes. The clock ticks down. Diplomatic channels, once abuzz with frantic activity, fall silent. A deathly calm settles over the globe, the silence before the storm. In the early morning hours, under a sky already pregnant with the promise of destruction, the unthinkable happens. From deep within the Chinese mainland, a volley of ballistic missiles erupts, tearing through the atmosphere. Their exhaust trails like fiery claw marks against the dawn sky. Each missile, a messenger of death, carrying a payload of unimaginable destruction, aimed at American military installations across the Pacific. The American early warning systems, a web of satellites and radar stations, detect the launches almost instantly. Sirens blare deep within Cheyenne Mountain, the heart of NORAD. The president, roused from a fitful sleep, is ushered to the White House bunker, the weight of a terrible decision thrust upon him. Minutes later, the first Chinese missiles strike. Guam, Okinawa, Pearl Harbor. Mushroom clouds, those terrifying symbols of human folly, bloom on the horizon, casting long, dark shadows across the Pacific. The first blows have been struck, but this is only the beginning. Section 2. Cities in Flames. The American response, when it comes, is swift and merciless. From silos across the American heartland, Minuteman missiles roar into the sky, their targets carefully chosen: Chinese military bases, command centers, and most ominously, major population centers. In Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, the sky lights up with a terrifying, otherworldly glow. The air raid sirens, a sound unheard for generations, wail a mournful dirge, but it is already too late. The first wave of American missiles detonates, turning concrete and steel into dust, vaporizing human beings in an instant. The initial exchange, a terrifying ballet of death, is over in less than an hour. But the horror has only just begun. Across the northern hemisphere, the sky darkens as smoke and debris from countless fires rise into the atmosphere, blotting out the sun. The world watches, aghast, as the two superpowers, consumed by their own hubris, unleash a nightmare of their own making. News reports, fragmentary and chaotic, paint a picture of unimaginable devastation. Millions dead in the initial strikes, countless more injured, trapped beneath rubble, gasping for breath in the poisoned air. The living envy the dead. Section 3. A world in ruins. In the hours and days that follow, the true scale of the catastrophe becomes horrifyingly clear. The nuclear exchange, a wound that will never truly heal, has ripped apart the fabric of civilization. The world, once connected by a web of trade, communication, and diplomacy, is now fractured, isolated, and teetering on the brink of collapse. The radioactive fallout, carried by the winds, respects no borders. It drifts across the globe, poisoning water supplies, contaminating crops, turning once fertile lands into barren wastelands. The lucky ones die quickly. The unlucky ones face a slow, agonizing death from radiation sickness. The global economy, already weakened by years of tension and uncertainty, collapses completely. Stock markets crash, never to recover. Banks shut their doors. Currencies become worthless. Trade grinds to a halt. The systems that once held the world together unravel, leaving behind chaos and despair. In the shelters, deep underground, the survivors huddle together, listening to the faint static of their radios, praying for a sign, any sign that someone, somewhere, is still alive. But the only sound that greets them is the mournful wail of the wind, a chilling reminder of the world they have lost. Section 1. A glimmer of hope. Day 5 dawns on a world forever changed. The sun, a pale ghost behind a veil of ash and smoke, casts a sickly pallor over a planet reeling from self-inflicted wounds. The air, heavy with the stench of death and decay, carries the faint metallic tang of radiation. In the shattered remnants of what were once bustling cities, the silence is deafening. No sirens wail, no engines roar, only the rustle of wind through broken glass and the soft moans of the dying break the eerie stillness. Yet, even in the face of unimaginable devastation, the human spirit, that indomitable force, flickers. In the shelters, deep beneath the ravaged earth, survivors stir. A baby's cry, a beacon of hope amid the despair, pierces the gloom. And in the hallowed halls of the United Nations, in a chamber miraculously spared the worst of the destruction, a different kind of struggle begins. Ambassadors, many representing nations now mere shadows on a map, gather, their faces etched with grief and determination. The time for blame, for recrimination, is over. The task now, to salvage what remains of a shattered world. Section 2. Picking up the pieces. The emergency session of the United Nations, convened amidst the ruins, is fraught with emotion, anger, grief, fear, but above all a shared sense of urgency. The world is dying, and only a united effort can hope to staunch the bleeding. The resolutions come in quick succession. A ceasefire, fragile and fraught with uncertainty, is declared. Both the United States and China, their arrogance humbled by the sheer scale of the catastrophe, signal their assent. The missiles are silent for now. A massive international relief effort, unprecedented in human history, is launched. Nations, even those who themselves teeter on the brink, dig deep, sending medical supplies, food, water, anything to alleviate the suffering. The world, so recently divided by ideology, by greed, by the pursuit of power, finds a strange unity in the face of annihilation. The common enemy is no longer a flag or an ideal, but an invisible killer, stalking the ruins of a civilization that dared to unleash it. Section 3. The long road ahead. The road to recovery, everyone knows, will be long and arduous. The bombs may have fallen silent, but the aftershocks of the nuclear exchange will continue to ripple through the world for generations to come. The immediate challenge is immense, providing aid to the millions of injured and displaced, containing the spread of radiation, burying the dead. Each task, Herculean in its scope, must be tackled with a grim determination. Beyond the immediate crisis lies an even greater challenge: rebuilding a world shattered to its core. The global economy lies in ruins. Political systems are in disarray. Trust, the bedrock of any lasting peace, is in short supply. Yet even as the world grapples with the enormity of the task ahead, a glimmer of hope emerges from the ashes. The nuclear exchange, a stark reminder of the fragility of human existence, has also served as a brutal wake-up call. The old ways of thinking, the zero-sum games of power politics, have led humanity to the brink. A new path must be forged, one based on cooperation, on empathy, on the understanding that the fate of all nations is inextricably intertwined. Section 1. Ghosts of Hiroshima. The world looks on, scarred and shaken at the aftermath. The ghosts of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, once distant specters, now loom large, their silent screams echoing across the decades. A new generation tastes the bitter fruit of nuclear war, a harvest sown by the hubris of their forefathers. The landscape of power has shifted, tectonic plates grinding against each other in the aftermath of unimaginable destruction. The United States, once a beacon of strength, now grapples with internal strife, its economy crippled, its global image shattered. China too bears the wounds of its own ambition. Cities lie in ruins, millions displaced, the specter of radiation poisoning a constant threat. The dragon, once ascendant, now limps, its fiery breath extinguished by the cold ashes of its own making. The old alliances, forged in an era before the firestorm, crumble. Nations, once content to exist in the shadow of the superpowers, now look inward, wary of entanglements that could lead to their own annihilation. The world, once bipolar, fragments into a mosaic of fear and uncertainty. Section 2. A New Dawn? From the ashes, a new movement emerges, fueled by the horror of what has transpired. A global outcry for disarmament, a groundswell of revulsion at the very idea of nuclear weapons. Politicians, once deaf to the pleas of peace activists, now find themselves swept along by a tide of public opinion they can no longer ignore. Treaties are hastily drafted, signed with trembling hands. Nuclear arsenals, once symbols of power and prestige, are dismantled, their deadly payloads neutralized, the fissile materials carefully stored, a grim reminder of a potential future averted. A new era of diplomacy, fragile and hesitant, takes root. The United Nations, its authority bolstered by the shared trauma of the nuclear exchange, becomes a true forum for dialogue and conflict resolution. Old enemies, brought together by their shared vulnerability, learn to talk, to listen, to compromise. But the scars run deep, the memories too raw to forget. The world rebuilds, but it does so with a newfound sobriety, a recognition that the pursuit of peace is not a naive ideal, but a matter of collective survival. The ghosts of the fallen, millions upon millions, serve as a stark warning, a reminder that the path to annihilation is paved with good intentions and the arrogance of power. Section 3. The Price of Peace. The world that emerges from the ashes is not a utopia. The wounds inflicted by the nuclear exchange take generations to heal. The environment, poisoned by radiation, recovers slowly, if at all. Birth defects become tragically common. a constant reminder of the genetic legacy of that terrible conflict. And yet, humanity endures, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, its ability to adapt, to overcome, to find hope even in the darkest of times. The survivors, those who lived through the firestorm, carry the burden of memory, but also the wisdom born of unimaginable suffering. The lessons learned from the abyss are etched into the very fabric of this new world order. The pursuit of peace, once a noble aspiration, is now understood as the only rational choice. The true cost of conflict, measured in the ashes of millions, is simply too high. The world moves forward, forever marked by the events of those fateful days. The nuclear war, a stark reminder of the potential for human self-destruction, also serves as a catalyst for a profound shift in consciousness. The old ways of thinking, the zero-sum games of power, are consigned to the dustbin of history. In their place, a new paradigm emerges, one based on cooperation, on empathy, on the understanding that the fate of all humanity is inextricably intertwined. The price of peace, the survivors know, is eternal vigilance, a commitment to dialogue and a willingness to choose hope over hate. The future, though uncertain, rests on that fragile foundation.